Next, any new faces present today? Okay, well, there we have an old new face. Welcome back, Emily. It's good to see you.
Hey, good to see you.
You'll find that very little has changed in terms of what happens here. Okay, so next we will review outstanding RFCs. So let me share my screen. Okay. All right, working from the bottom, stacks bombs still blocked unless anybody knows different. Nope. Okay. Forest, there's this draft RFC sticking around. If this is still of interest to you, just a nudge to look at it now that you're background. Then we've got the poetry Paketo Python RFC. What's the latest on this?
So I am the only Python maintainer, I believe, as of right now. So, I mean, I helped write this RFC, and so I looked for a couple of folks just to see if anyone had any comments or questions, or anything. It seems, I think, that activity has slowed down here on this RFC, unless something has happened recently. Nope. So I can just go ahead and close it. Not close, but merge this if that's cool with everyone else.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for the update. So it sounds like we're expecting that by next week this will be merged.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, next we've got RFC for secure runtime environments. Sam is not, wait, sorry. Sam is, I think, not here at the minute. Does anyone here want to speak on this? Anything that needs to be done?
I was just reading through this and adding some comments, but I hadn't gotten all the way to clicking submit yet. I feel like this is a good idea. The one thing I'd like to probably reach out to Sam to talk about is if we could include, I think this RC suggests we sort of audit every time we're writing temporary files. But I wonder if it would make sense to actually do a little bit of that before this RFC, so we could put in like canonical examples. Like we do this when we're writing config files based off bindings at runtime, or we do this when we're writing logs, because we might want slightly more detailed recommendations. Like I can definitely see us putting some of this ephemeral config in like temp, but maybe we want to pick another place for logs to go so that, you know, in a case where someone actually is running a container read-only in Kubernetes, we can tell them what volume to mount something readable to make everything work instead of a bunch of random volumes.
That's a good point. Okay, so I guess we're looking, you'll have some comments on this asynchronously later, and we'll keep chatting about this. Cool. Then we've got this RFC for removing shell-specific interfaces. This is also from Sam. I know that Sam opened this pull request against the Go build pack to sort of, I guess, demonstrate the change that he's talking about and also do it in a place that he thought would be reasonable. There's some work actively happening on that pull request now. Is there anything else that needs to be done on this RFC or points that people want to raise now? I did have this question that I added on here. I wonder if anyone in this group knows the answer to this. Where basically like the RFC is talking about a change that will be coming in the life cycle that will require Paketo to change its approach to process types. And I was wondering like when we expect that change to land. Last I checked, this issue had no sort of like scheduling information on it. Do we have any expectations about this?
I can speak to that a little bit. So the RFC has been approved, but there is some concern about going ahead and implementing it without also making progress on like utility build packs in the CMB project. And this is mostly from the Salesforce folks, because this RFC basically removes support for a user provided .profile file. And the way you would still keep that interface consistent to users is to then provide that support with a build pack. So they are concerned that if we take that first step without then providing a replacement build pack and making it available to everyone, that would be a regression that people wouldn't like. So I think we're still negotiating whether we can make this change in isolation or whether we need to agree about a broader set of RFCs before we can implement it.
That makes sense. Is there anywhere asynchronously or in writing that this conversation is happening, or is this mostly in working groups?
I think it is should mostly be in writing on the RFC.
This 193.
On the PR for this RFC, not in the text of the RFC itself, but in some of the conversations that happened around its approval.
Okay, great. Thanks. We'll probably link to that context on this RFC. Okay, then we've got this build pack YAML to environment variables for PHP. Any updates here?
I read through put my approval. Nothing seems out of place to me. Everything seems pretty straightforward. I'm also cool with the discussions that seem to have happened here on this PR. I think there are a couple unresolved questions that remain in the RFC, but I'm not sure that I have a helpful answer to any of those questions. So I felt okay putting my approval on with the parts that I have some, input into.
Let's see so Dan is another PHP maintainer on the call. Is there anything that you need to like have happen with this before it's ready to be merged?
I can try to take one more quick look. I haven't looked at it in a few weeks.
Okay, that sounds good. And Tim, you mentioned that there's like unresolved questions on the RFC. Do those questions need resolution before this can be merged?
One in particular, possibly, but I'm not sure. So it's the question around the naming of the memcached and Redis store variables. I could go either way on that question, which is why I didn't comment here, but I would imagine it would be hard to move forward without coming to a decision on names for those.
Okay, so it's like a naming bike shed moment a little bit.
In particular, it's that the current names that I chose were generic to just memcached and Redis as services and not namespace to the PHP build packs. And so I did that in an attempt to make it so that we could potentially like have specific service hookups inside of our build packs, but use the same environment variable across all of them. But I don't know if that's a dangerous thing to do. Like potentially you're going to want to have PHP specific service hookups and then front end specific hookups as well that both use Redis or something. I'm not particularly well versed in Redis or memcached. Yeah, I just wanted someone who is a little bit more of an expert to take a look at that, but I haven't seen any pushback so far.
Okay, fair enough. So then I guess it's to PHP maintainers to kind of like hash out this question of namespacing the environment variables on the RFC. Okay, we've got this proposal to alter the builder order. Has anything changed with this since last time?
I think the remaining question is on the amount of validation that we should do
Mhm.
prior to making the change, and possibly how we would go about doing that. I know you ran the tests against our sample repo.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what other sample applications that would be reliable enough to run this against. I don't know if anyone has thoughts.
There's also like all of the test fixtures in various like Buildpacks repos, like the language family repos, for instance, have lots of different test fixtures that we could try out. I notably did not test this reordering on the full builder, and I personally have more concerns about or would love to see some validation of the full builder as opposed to needing more validation of the base builder. Just like making sure that the additional language families in the full builder still behave well with the reorder.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can probably take a look at that at some point. I don't know when I'll get to it, but yeah, I can try to run that against the full builder.
Okay, you can also ping me. I probably have time at some point this week.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, and then we've got this RFC for Java front-end support in web servers. What is going on with this one? Anything to say about it, Ryan?
I guess it seems to be positively received. I seem to see a bunch of requests for me to add stuff to it when I was already afraid that maybe it was too big and that folks were going to ask me to remove stuff. So it sounds like people are on board generally with the idea. I think I need to clarify a couple of things. Like there were questions about our node or node module is going to appear in the launch image, and like explicitly in the way that it's written, it isn't clear that they're not going to be in the launch image, but like it's pretty easy to implement it in such a way that they don't appear. Like obviously, like something like Nginx would not require node or node modules as launch requirements, and so ultimately the Nginx command would not have access to those things. It would only have access to stuff that's on the workspace that's actually written as static files. But I should be explicit in the RFC that is the case, and that is how it should be written out. The other bits about like also supporting Apache seem reasonable and aren't terribly expensive. And then I also need to clarify like why they're separate groups, which is mostly because Yarn and NPM have mutually exclusive detection criteria, but unfortunately share similar files. So like Yarn is looking for a Yarn lock file, whereas NPM is looking for a package JSON file. However, Yarn also uses a package JSON file, so you can't have Yarn and NPM in the same detection group because both of them would detect in the Yarn case. And then that just creates a weird situation where NPM installs a bunch of stuff and then Yarn installs a bunch of stuff for no reason. So they actually have to be like mutually exclusive groups, rather than say a single group with optional buildpacks, but I can outline that particular information as well.
Cool. Any questions or comments on this one that people want to make here? Otherwise, it sounds like there's active conversation on the PR. All right. So we've come to the end of running through the open RFCs. So heading back here, we've got a line item for CNB v2 updates and questions. Is anything happening in the Buildpack author tooling group that we need to know about? I haven't made it there in a little while.
I went to the sync last week, but it was the first time I'd been there in a while too. And it was a brief one. We ended early because there wasn't great attendance, still people out from the holiday. So not much to report there. At least nothing new to report there from last week.
So then the next one will be not this Friday, but the Friday after. Yeah, cool. All right. Then the last thing on the agenda right now is converting the Docker Hub user to an org.
Yeah, there's been some requests for this, and I've gotten approval from the CFF folks to like make this possible. One of the things this might mean is that the credentials we use to push to Docker Hub are probably not going to be the same. And so when we go to actually convert this from a user into an org, I imagine any actions that happen to be pushing Docker images to those locations at that moment will probably break. So there will be probably a brief period of time where we won't be able to push Docker images, but hopefully we'll make that as small as possible. I will broadcast loudly in public channels that we're doing this to make sure that everyone is on board, and I'll do it at a time when it's like everyone has work overlap hours, at least the folks who are on the core team. So Dan, I'll make sure that for the Java side that you're available at the time I go ahead and possibly break things. My plan is to do it at some point this week, but I have to coordinate that time with the CFF folks just to make sure that they can like do things like set up a credit card so that Docker could possibly charge us for stuff if they have to. So yeah, I'll let y'all know, but that should be hopefully happening this week.
What like technically is changing with that? Like, what are they changing on the CFF side?
Mostly it comes down to like when you convert a user to an org, then the org has to have an administrator, and that administrator has to have like a credit card that's attached to their user. And so like the user we've been using to push ceases to be a user at that point and is like an org. And I don't really know how that might change the credentials that we have, because I can't imagine that you can log in as an org.
I think
imagine,
unintuitively you can log in as an org
Can
on
you?
Docker Hub. Like it is not what I would have expected either, but if I remember correctly from the Buildpacks org, you can log in directly as the org itself.
Okay. So then maybe nothing changes. I'm only bringing this up in case something does change and we need to issue new credentials for folks. So
Okay, yeah, that I was wondering about that, if there's a plan to make like sub users off that org or something, or
we will definitely, yeah, we'll definitely have like at least an administrator so that someone can go in and administer the organization. It's yet to be seen whether or not we need other users besides that particular administrator user.
Okay, sounds good.
Great. All right. Is there anything else that people want to raise that's not yet on the agenda?
We normally do a project update. I don't know, that didn't get copied into the agenda
You're
this
right.
week.
Let me, oh, it's in the standing items. Cool. Well, one update is that service binding support for NuGet configuration and npm-rc and yarn RCs is forthcoming soon. It's like pretty much feature complete. So that will resolve a few of the use cases that have been popping up in the Paketo Slack over the past couple of weeks. Anything else that people want to shout out in the project?
There's Java quarterly updates this week, so this week's release is going to have well, possibly this week for some, next week for the rest. We'll have new JVM versions for everyone.
We are beginning work on putting together the web servers language family build pack. So keep an eye out for that. It will be going in Paketo community at first, but when that's released and ready to go, I will let people know.
Great. Any other updates?
I see Kevin on, so I mentioned we've been working on Open Liberty build pack. Not quite at a 1.0 yet, but we're stabilizing, adding features and things like that. It's coming along nicely.
All right. Any other late breaking agenda items? Okay. In that case, see y'all next week.